Olivia had been in Paris for less than 4 hours when she decided she was already getting the hang of it. She and her friend Marcus had left their hotel to walk without a plan, which was exactly the kind of thing Olivia loved doing in a new city. The street was narrow, the buildings looked almost too perfect to be real, and every few steps there was another cafe with little round tables, facing outward like the whole neighborhood had agreed that people watching was a public activity. Marcus slowed down near one of the cafes and looked through the window. This one. Olivia glanced inside. Small space, soft yellow lights, chalkboard menu, a few people talking quietly over coffee, yet this looks cute. They stepped in together, still carrying the energy of tourists who had spent the whole morning saying wow and nearly everything. Olivia smiled as she approached the counter. "Hi, can we get a table for 2? The woman behind the counter looked at her for a second. Not angry, not exactly confused either, just still. Then she answered, "Bonjour." Olivia nodded quickly. "Yes, hi, 2 people." The woman gave a small motion toward the back. "Do." Marcus leaned closer and whispered, "I think that means yes." Olivia gave a tiny laugh. "Haha, I got that part." They made their way to a little table near the wall. Olivia slipped into her chair and looked around. The cafe felt calm in a way that made her lower her own voice without meaning to. Cups clinked softly. A man near the window folded his newspaper. A server passed by with the tray and said something quick and polite to an older woman seated alone. Marcus picked up the menu. "Okay, I'm already lost." "Same," Olivia said. "But in a fun way." A server came over. Slim, serious, maybe in his 30s. He held a small notepad and waited. Olivia looked up immediately. "Yeah, can I do a coffee and maybe one of these pastries?" She pointed to a word she could not pronounce that one. The server didn't write anything down. Instead, he said, "Bonjour." There was a beat of silence. Olivia blinked. "Oh, hi." Marcus looked at her, then at the server. The server stayed polite, but something in his face closed a little. "Bonjour, madame." Olivia straightened. "Right, bonjour, sorry." And for him, Marcus jumped in. "And I'll take a cappuccino." "Oh, thank you." The server nodded once, wrote quickly, and walked away. Olivia watched him leave. "Wait, was that weird?" Marcus shrugged. "Maybe he just wanted us to say hello first." She laughed once, but quieter this time. "Seriously? I mean, maybe." Olivia looked toward the counter where the woman from before was speaking warmly to a man who had just entered. He had barely stepped inside before saying, "Bonjour, madame," in a bright automatic tone. The woman smiled immediately. It was small, but it was there. A little opening. A social door unlocking. Olivia leaned back. "Okay, I think we missed some kind of rule." Marcus grinned. "We've been here half a day and already broke cafe law." "I said hi." "You said hi like you were ordering at a sandwich shop." She gave him a look. At the next table, a middle-aged couple glanced over. Not rudely, just briefly, the way people do when they catch the tone of tourists trying to decode a place in real time. Olivia lowered her voice again. "I honestly thought she was being cold at first." Marcus turned his menu over and said, "Maybe she thought we were." That landed harder than Olivia expected. She looked around again, more carefully now. Everyone who entered seemed to begin the same way. A greeting, eye contact, a pause. Then, whatever they needed. No one rushed straight into asking for something. No one treated the staff like the conversation started with the transaction. The server returned with their drinks. He placed Olivia's coffee down gently, then Marcus's cappuccino, then the pastry. "Merci," Marcus said. The server gave him a faint nod. Olivia quickly added, "Merci?" And, bonjour again. For the first time, the server almost smiled. "Bonjour," he said, and moved on. Marcus looked at her over the rim of his cup. Progress. Olivia let out a breath and wrapped both hands around the coffee. "Wow. It's like I walked in speaking normal American and somehow sounded rude without even trying." Outside, people kept passing the window in a steady rhythm. Inside, the cafe stayed soft and composed, as if nothing dramatic had happened at all. But for Olivia, something had shifted. What at first felt like chilly service now seemed more like a signal she had failed to read. She realized the awkwardness had started before the menu, before the pastry, before any of it. It had started at hello, slightly exceeding the word count as allowed. Olivia kept one hand around her coffee cup and watched the room with new caution. Like the cafe had quietly changed languages without anyone announcing it. Marcus tore off a piece of pastry and said, "Okay, so rule 1. Say bonjour before acting like food is the emergency." Olivia laughed under her breath. Wow. Thank you, international etiquette professor. I'm serious. I know. She took a sip and glanced toward the counter again. Another customer had just walked in. This time she paid close attention. The man stepped inside, paused, and said, "Bonjour, madame." The woman behind the counter answered right away, warmer than before. "Bonjour, monsieur, monsieur." Then came the question, then the order. Then the easy little exchange that seemed effortless because both sides already knew the script. Olivia leaned closer. "Yeah, okay. That's definitely a thing." Marcus nodded. "A very strong thing." She looked down at the menu again, but now the words felt less confusing than the room itself. Back home, she was used to speed. You walked in, smiled, ordered, maybe chatted, maybe asked for substitutions, extra ice, dressing on the side, whatever. The whole process was casual, friendly, efficient. Here, it felt like efficiency without ceremony somehow made you look careless. The server came back a few minutes later and stood beside the table. "Vous désirez autre chose?" Olivia froze. Marcus gave her a look. "You got this?" She didn't got this. The server waited politely. Olivia pointed to the menu. "Do you have, eggs? Like breakfast? Or is it mostly pastries right now?" There was a tiny pause. Not dramatic, but enough. The server answered in English this time. "We serve what is on the menu." "Oh, right? Sure." Olivia smiled quickly. "I just meant, like, can the kitchen make something simple?" Again that pause. Marcus looked down at his cup as if he could feel the temperature of the interaction dropping. The server said, "No, madame." Olivia nodded too fast. "Okay, no problem." He left, and she sank back into her chair. That was bad. Marcus tried not to laugh. "It wasn't great. I was just asking." "Yeah, but I think maybe this is not a custom breakfast remix kind of place." Olivia stared at the pastry. "Why does every sentence I say sound wrong here?" Marcus shrugged. "Because you're still talking like the customer is always improvising." She gave him a skeptical look. "That is such a made-up sentence." "No, listen. In the US, we kind of assume everything is flexible. Here it feels like the place has its own rhythm, and you either join it or interrupt it." Olivia sighed. I hate that. You might be right." At the table beside them, an older woman called softly to the server. She began with bonjour, even though they had clearly already spoken earlier. Then she asked for more hot water. The server responded immediately, almost gently. Olivia watched the whole thing. Same request energy? No. Same volume? No. Same approach? Definitely not. She whispered, "I think I'm being too direct." "Very possibly." Wow. A few minutes later, she decided to try again, mostly because now the social puzzle bothered her more than the food. When the server passed nearby, she sat up. "Excuse me, bonjour." The server turned back. "Bonjour, madame?" His tone had softened just slightly. Olivia continued, slower this time. "Could you tell me what this is?" She pointed to an item on the menu. "I'm sorry, my French is very bad." That landed differently. She could feel it immediately. The server looked at the menu, then at her. "It is tartine. Toast with butter and jam?" "Oh." She smiled. "Okay, that sounds good, actually." He nodded to hers. Simple. Marcus, trying to help, jumped in with full American enthusiasm. "Can we get one of those? And maybe another plate so we can split it?" The server looked at him, then wrote something down. Olivia waited. Nothing, no extra warmth. No little moment. As soon as he stepped away, Marcus said, "What? What did I do?" She pointed at him. "You just came in at level 10. I was being nice. You were being very confident." "Is confidence illegal here?" She tried not to laugh. "Not illegal. Just maybe louder than the room." Marcus leaned back and looked around. "Okay, wow. You're right. Everybody here sounds like they're talking inside a library designed by very elegant people." That made Olivia laugh for real, but quietly enough that only he heard it. The tartine arrived, beautifully simple, exactly as described. No garnish tricks, no giant plate, no performance. The server set it down and Marcus said, "Thank you." Olivia added, "Merci beaucoup." This time the server gave the smallest real smile yet. Je vous en prie? Marcus raised his eyebrows. Did we just unlock level 2? Maybe. Then came the bill situation. Olivia looked around and waited. And waited. No one brought a check. No one hovered. No one asked if they were finished. After several minutes she frowned. Are we trapped here? Marcus smirked. Maybe this is the consequence of not saying bonjour correctly. I'm serious. He gestured subtly toward another table. A couple had finished eating, but instead of looking impatient, they were still sitting there talking. Nobody seemed to be rushing them out. Nobody seemed concerned about table turnover at all. Olivia whispered, "Back home, they would have checked on us like 3 times by now." "Yep," and asked whether we wanted dessert. "Yep," and then dropped the check in that smooth, little casual way that means, "Please leave soon, but politely." Marcus nodded. Exactly. A younger server passed by, and Olivia lifted her hand a little. "Hi, could we get the check?" The server stopped, expression neutral. "Bonjour, madame." Olivia's eyes widened. "Right, bonjour, sorry. Could we have the check, please, L'Addition?" Yes, that." He nodded and walked off. Marcus dropped his head into one hand. It happened again. "I know." She started laughing, trying not to make noise. My brain resets every 30 seconds. When the bill finally came, she glanced at it and instinctively reached for her card. Then she paused. "No rush," Marcus said. "I know, but I feel like now I'm scared of paying," Rami grinned. "At this point, just bow slightly and say bonjour to the receipt." She snorted into her coffee. Seriously. Still, beneath the joking, the discomfort had become something more specific. It was no longer that the staff seemed rude. It was that Olivia could now feel the edges of an invisible system she didn't understand. Every time she acted on American autopilot tasks quickly, customized casually, moved the interaction forward, something in the room tightened. Not enough to create a scene. Just enough to remind her she was out of sync. She looked toward the window, then back at the counter. Then at the servers moving from table to table with the same measured tempo. "This is so strange," she said softly. Marcus shook his head. "No, it's only strange to us." Olivia sat with that for a second. And that was the part beginning to bother her most. Because for the first time since walking in, she had the uncomfortable feeling that the room was not being difficult. The room was simply being itself. And she was the one arriving with assumptions tucked into every sentence. Olivia was still looking at the receipt like it might explain the whole country, when she noticed the woman at the next table smiling at her. Not a big smile, just a knowing one. The woman looked to be in her 50s, dressed simply, with a scarf looped neatly around her neck and a small espresso cup in front of her. She had probably heard enough of Olivia and Marcus's whispered analysis to understand exactly what kind of morning they were having. She tilted her head and said, in careful English, "Your first cafe in Paris." Olivia laughed immediately. "Is it that obvious?" The woman gave a light shrug. "A little." Marcus leaned in. "We're trying. We just keep getting everything slightly wrong." The woman smiled again. "That is normal." Olivia let out a breath. "Okay, good, because, wow, we thought the staff didn't like us." The woman's expression changed, not offended, but gently corrective. No, it is usually not that." Olivia sat up straighter. "Then what is it?" "Because I swear every time I open my mouth, I accidentally break another rule." The woman rested her hands around her cup. "Okay, there's not many rules. It is one feeling." "One feeling," Marcus repeated. "Yes," she nodded. "You enter a place. You greet people. You recognize them before you ask for something." Olivia looked down for a second. "So when I walked in and said, 'Table for 2, that was bad." The woman smiled with sympathy. "Not bad like cruel. Just," she searched for the word, "abrupt." Olivia said softly. The woman continued, "In France, especially in a small cafe, a shop, a bakery, you do not begin with your need. You begin with the person." Marcus pointed lightly at the counter. "That's what we were starting to notice." "Everyone says bonjour before anything else?" "Yes," the woman said. Because bonjour is not decoration. It is not extra politeness. It is the beginning. Without it, the conversation feels hard. Olivia gave a small, embarrassed laugh. That explains so much. The woman lifted one shoulder. To you, maybe you were being casual, friendly, efficient. To the other person, maybe it feels like... She paused again. Like you skipped a step of respect. Olivia pressed her lips together. Wow, Marcus said. Back home, moving straight to the order doesn't really mean anything. It's normal, of course, the woman said. And here also people know tourists are different. But still, the feeling remains. Olivia leaned forward, more interested now than defensive. So it's not just about the word. It's about acknowledging the person first. Exactly. She said it so simply that Olivia almost laughed again, this time at herself. For the last half hour, she had been treating the cafe like a puzzle of tone and service style and hidden judgment. When really, the central mistake was much smaller and much more human. She'd entered the room thinking the social part of the interaction would begin after the practical part. Here, apparently, it was the opposite. Marcus asked, "Does this happen a lot with Americans?" The woman laughed quietly. Not only Americans, many visitors. But yes, Americans sometimes arrive with very open energy. Olivia smiled. That is a very kind way to say too much energy. The woman grinned. Sometimes, Olivia put a hand over her face for a second. The woman continued, Americans often smile fast, speak fast, ask fast. It is not rude in your culture. But in France, when someone is working, especially in a smaller place, there is a structure. Greeting first shows you understand you are speaking to a person, not only to a role. That sentence landed fully. Olivia glanced toward the server who had taken their order. He was now at another table, speaking in the same calm tone she had noticed earlier. Nothing about him looked cold now. If anything, he looked consistent. She was the one who had walked in expecting immediate warmth in a specifically American style and then interpreted the absence of that warmth as disapproval. She said, I think I assumed friendliness would look the same everywhere. The woman nodded. Many people do, Marcus added, and if it doesn't, we think something went wrong. Yes. The woman smiled. But many times, nothing is wrong. You are only reading with the wrong code. Olivia repeated that under her breath. The wrong code? For a second, none of them spoke. Cups clinked somewhere behind the counter. The front door opened, and almost automatically a man entering the cafe said, Bonjour? The woman at the register answered immediately. The exchange now seemed obvious, almost elegant in its simplicity. Olivia shook her head. It's funny. In the US, customer service is so performative sometimes. Smiling, checking in, asking how everything is. If you don't get that, you feel ignored. The woman listened carefully. Olivia continued, but here it's like, the warmth is more conditional on whether you've entered the situation properly. The woman raised a finger, pleased. Yes. Yes, that is closer. Marcus chuckled. So we basically walked in and opened the conversation in the middle. Exactly, she said. Olivia laughed. Whoa! That is exactly what it felt like. The woman took a small sip of espresso and then introduced herself. My name's Camille. I'm Olivia. Marcus. Camille nodded. Enchanted. Olivia smiled. See? Now I want to restart the whole morning. Camille laughed. You can. Olivia blinked. You mean here? Why not? Marcus looked amused. Like leave and come back in. Camille spread her hands. It is a cafe, not a courtroom. That made all three of them laugh. Olivia lowered her voice and said, Okay, wait. So teach me properly. If I go into a cafe, what do I say? Camille answered with patient precision. If you enter, first say bonjour if it is morning or daytime. Bonjour is enough. If you want to be a little more formal, bonjour madame or bonjour monsieur. Then you wait a moment. Then you ask, Marcus said, and when leaving, oh, revoir, always good. Olivia nodded slowly, like she was finally being given the map after trying to navigate by instinct. And if I need something at the table? Camille said, you still begin politely. Bonjour, excuses moise, or pardon? Something that opens gently. Olivia smiled. Back home, I'd just be like, "Hi, can I get Camille laughed?" "Yes, I heard." Olivia covered her face again. "I'm never recovering from this." "You will," Camille said. "Because now you understand it is not rejection. It is ritual." That word changed everything. Ritual, not stiffness, not hostility, not snobbery. Ritual, a repeated social gesture that tells everyone, "I see you, I respect the space, I know how to enter." Marcus leaned back and said, "That's actually kind of beautiful." Camille nodded once. "Yes, but when people do not know it, it can feel harsh." Olivia looked around the cafe again. This time the room no longer felt guarded. It felt structured. The silence, the measured tone, the brief eye contact, the greeting before the request, all of it belonged to the same logic. She had mistaken unfamiliarity for unfriendliness. And now that someone had finally explained the rule beneath the mood, the whole morning rearranged itself in her mind. The server had not corrected her because he disliked her. The woman at the counter had not been cold because she was offended by tourists. They had simply been waiting for her to enter the interaction in the expected way. Camille glanced toward the door. "You should try again somewhere else today," Olivia laughed. "You really think I need practice immediately?" "Yes," Camille said. "Before your American instincts return." Marcus laughed. "Too late. They're very strong." Olivia shook her head, smiling now in a completely different way than before. "No, seriously, thank you. This helps a lot." Camille, travel is often this. Small misunderstandings that reveal very big assumptions. Olivia repeated that quietly. Very big assumptions. Then she looked back toward the front of the cafe where another customer had just entered and, as if demonstrating the lesson one more time for her benefit, said clearly, "Bonjour." The answer came at once. Warm, natural, effortless. And for the first time since sitting down, Olivia understood that the real misunderstanding had never been about coffee, menus, or service at all. It had been about the invisible line between transaction and human acknowledgement. Back home, that line sat in one place. Here, it sat in another, and until Camille named it, Olivia had been crossing it without even seeing it. By the time Olivia and Marcus stepped back onto the sidewalk, Paris no longer felt unfriendly. It felt precise. That was the difference. A few minutes earlier, Olivia had been carrying around the sting of having done something wrong without knowing what it was. Now the mistake had shape. It had language. It had a doorway and a fix. Marcus tucked his hands into his jacket pockets and looked down the street. "So, round two?" Olivia laughed. "You mean another chance for me to publicly forget how to say bonjour?" "Exactly." She narrowed her eyes at him. "You're enjoying this too much." A little. They started walking with no real destination, just letting the afternoon move them forward. The street was alive in that calm Paris way. Olivia was still adjusting too. No one seemed to be rushing, but everyone still seemed to know where they were going. Chairs scraped lightly across pavement outside cafes. A woman in a long coat stepped into a bakery, and even from outside, Olivia could hear the opening word, "Bonjour." She pointed immediately. "There! Again!" Marcus nodded. "It's everywhere!" "Which makes sense now," Olivia said. "It's not just a cafe thing. It's like a social password." He looked at her. "That sounds weirdly techie." "It is techie. I'm processing." After another block, they slowed in front of a small boulangerie with a narrow window packed with tarts, sandwiches, and neat rows of pastries that looked too polished to touch. The place was smaller than the cafe. Only 2 people were inside. A woman was choosing bread near the back, and behind the counter stood a man with silver hair and half-moon glasses. Marcus looked at Olivia. "This is your moment?" She stared at the door. "Wow. I feel nervous now." "Nervous to say hello?" "Nervous to say hello correctly." Olivia laughed under her breath and stepped inside. The man behind the counter looked up. This time, Olivia did not begin with what she wanted. She did not point. She did not rush. She met his eyes and said, clearly, "Bonjour, monsieur." "Monsieur?" The change was immediate. Not dramatic. Not movie dramatic, but immediate. The man's face opened a little. "Bonjour, madame." It was such a small exchange. Maybe 2 seconds in total, but Olivia felt the room receive her differently. Not because she had become French in one afternoon, not because she had perfect pronunciation. Marcus stepped in behind her and followed her lead. Bonjour, the man nodded warmly. Bonjour, Olivia glanced sideways at Marcus with a barely contained look that said, see? The man waited. Now Olivier looked at the display case. Je voudrais. She hesitated, then gave up with a smile. Sorry, English, the man answered in lightly accented English. Yes, of course. Relief flashed across her face. Thank you. Could I please have one croissant and one of those apple tarts? Of course. He turned calmly, placed the pastries into small paper sleeves, and set them on the counter. The whole interaction felt smoother than anything that had happened in the cafe that morning. There was no tension sitting under the exchange, no strange little pauses, no feeling that she had entered the conversation halfway through. Marcus leaned toward the glass case. And I'll take that sandwich too. The man nodded. Yes, monsieur. Olivia waited while he wrapped it, and something almost funny happened inside her. She could feel her own body slowing down to match the room. Her voice lowered without effort. Her attention sharpened. She was no longer trying to push the transaction forward. She was simply participating in it. When the man named the price, Olivia handed over her card and said, Merci beaucoup. This time his smile was real and easy. Avec plaisir. They stepped back onto the street carrying a paper bag that already smelled like butter and warm bread. Marcus looked at her and said, Okay. That was completely different. Olivia turned to him with wide eyes. I know. No coldness, no weird pause, no social disaster. She laughed. No accidental international offense. They moved to the side near a stone bench and stood there for a second before opening the bag. Marcus pulled out the sandwich while Olivia held up the croissant-like evidence in a courtroom. I would like the record to show, she said, that Bonjour works. Marcus nodded solemnly. The court accepts this. She tore off a flaky corner and shook her head in disbelief. Seriously though, it's wild that one small thing changes the whole experience. Marcus took a bite and answered after chewing. I don't even think it's the word itself. What do you mean? I think it's that the word carries the whole approach with it. You said bonjour, but you also paused. You looked at him. You entered the space differently. Olivia lowered the croissant. He went on. At the cafe, we walked in like the city owed us a seamless service experience. She groaned. That sounds awful when you say it like that. But kinda true. She let out a slow breath. Yeah. For a moment they watched people pass. A teenager walked into the bakery they had just left and, without hesitation, greeted the man behind the counter. Another smooth exchange. Another tiny ritual repeated like it had always existed, Olivia said. Back home, I usually think of politeness as tone. Smiling, sounding friendly, saying thank you. Marcus nodded. But here it feels more structural, she continued. Like the order matters. First you acknowledge the person. Then you ask. Then everything else can happen. That sounds exactly right. She smiled to herself. Camille really saved us. Absolutely. They ate while walking, letting the city move around them, and for the first time since arriving that morning, Olivia felt less like she was observing Paris through glass. She had not mastered anything. She still did not know what half the signs meant. She still wasn't sure when to use French and when to switch to English. She still might mess up again within the hour. But the city no longer felt randomly difficult. It felt legible. A little later they stopped at a small corner shop to buy water. This time Marcus reached the door first and grinned. Want me to handle this one? Olivia crossed her arms. Oh, now you're an expert. No, but I can say one word with confidence. They went inside. Marcus looked at the woman at the register and said, Bonjour, madame. The woman smiled immediately. Bonjour, Olivia almost laughed out loud. Marcus grabbed 2 bottles of water from a cooler and brought them up. Deux, s'il vous plaît. The woman rang them up, still smiling faintly. Merci. When they stepped back outside, Marcus lifted the bottle like a trophy. Flawless? Olivia shook her head. Your accent was terrible. It was brave. It was terrible and brave. He accepted that. Fair. Then he looked at her more thoughtfully. You know what's funny? What? This morning, if someone had told us French people are rude in cafes, we probably would have believed it. Olivia's smile faded into something more reflective. Yeah, because that's what it felt like from our side. She nodded slowly. But it wasn't rudeness. It was us missing the opening move. They resumed walking, quieter now. It was that the same behavior could tell a completely different story depending on where you were standing. Olivia had read reserve as rejection, brevity as coldness, structure as attitude. But once she understood the ritual underneath it, the whole emotional meaning changed. She glanced through another cafe window as they passed. A customer was speaking with a server. Nothing flashy, no big smiles, no exaggerated warmth. Yet the exchange looked balanced now, even respectful. Olivia said softly, "I think I was waiting for the room to adapt to me." Marcus looked over. And the moment I adapted to the room, it stopped feeling hostile. He smiled. "That's probably the whole trip right there." She laughed once. "Wow! Don't get wise on me just because you survived one Bonjour." He grinned. "Too late?" Olivia looked ahead at the next block, at the next shopfront, at the next chance to get something wrong and maybe get it right instead. The embarrassment from earlier had not vanished completely, but it had changed shape. It was lighter now. Useful, almost instructive. Because once she understood that the ritual was not there to exclude her, but to guide the interaction, trying again no longer felt like damage control. It felt like being invited in properly. And that changed everything. Expansion rules confirmed. I will expand only the requested section. I will not continue to the next section automatically. I will strictly follow the allocated word count. I will not produce fewer words than allocated, slightly exceeding the word count as allowed. That evening, Olivia and Marcus ended up sitting along the Seine with a paper bag of leftover pastries between them, and the kind of tiredness that only shows up after a full day of walking. Thinking, and quietly rethinking yourself. The light had started to soften over the water. Boats moved past at an unhurried pace. A few tourists nearby were taking photos, but even that felt calmer now than it would have earlier in the day. Olivia rested her elbows on her knees and looked at the river for a while before speaking. "It's funny," she said. "This morning I honestly thought the big story of the day was going to be that Paris cafe service is rude." Marcus laughed. "You were very close to making that your official opinion."
No.
She smiled, but there was a little embarrassment in it. What unsettled her now was not that she had made a mistake. It was how quickly she had been ready to explain the mistake using a stereotype. The discomfort had lasted maybe 10 minutes before her brain had already started trying to turn it into a conclusion. They were cold. They were annoyed. They don't like tourists. This place is unfriendly. All of those explanations had felt available almost instantly, not because they were true, but because they were easy. Marcus picked up a pastry and broke it in half. To be fair, it really did feel that way at first. "Yeah," Olivia said. "That's the part I keep thinking about. It felt real. I wasn't inventing the awkwardness." "No," he said. "The awkwardness was real. We just misunderstood what it meant." That stayed with her. The awkwardness had been real. The discomfort had been real. The little pauses, the closed expressions, the slower replies, the subtle sense of being out of place, none of that had been imaginary. What had been wrong was the interpretation. Olivia leaned back on her hands. "I think that's what travel does to people. You feel something real, but you don't yet know how to read it." Keith nodded. "Exactly." She looked down at the stone walkway beneath her shoes. "Back home, I always think politeness means being open right away. Smiling, sounding cheerful, making things easy, acting relaxed. Same. But here," she continued, "politeness wasn't about acting relaxed. It was about showing respect to the setting first. Like, before you bring your personality into the interaction, you acknowledge the relationship." Marcus turned to her. "That's a very sophisticated thing to say after one croissant breakthrough." She laughed. "Wow, thank you. I'm evolving." He grinned rapidly. Still, she meant it. The whole day had rearranged something in her. Not in a huge dramatic life-changing way, more in the way a small hinge changes how a door moves. Once she saw it, she could not unsee it. In the United States, many daily interactions were built around accessibility. Service felt immediate. Informal warmth was often treated as proof of good intentions. Efficiency and friendliness could happen at the same time, and customers were used to feeling welcomed even when they skipped straight to what they wanted. In France, at least in the spaces she had moved through that day, the sequence felt different. Warmth came after recognition, not before it. The greeting was not a decorative extra or a cute local custom for tourists to memorize. It was the thing that established the humanity of the exchange. First, "Hello." Then, the request. Olivia said it out loud, almost to herself. First, "Hello." Then, the request. Marcus repeated it. Simple, but apparently not simple. She smiled. Yeah. A couple walked past them speaking French, and Olivia caught only a few words. But she heard one clearly as they approached someone sitting on the low wall nearby. Bonsoir, she laughed softly. There it is again. Marcus followed her gaze. You're going to hear greetings in your sleep now. I probably deserve that. She grew quiet again. What bothered her most, in a useful way, was remembering how personal she had made the first cafe interaction. She had assumed the staff's reserve was about her. About whether they liked her tone, her face, her foreignness, her presence. But the whole point was that it was not personal. That was the revelation. The cafe had not been evaluating her as an individual nearly as much as it had been responding to the shape of the interaction itself. She had entered abruptly, so the exchange had felt abrupt. She had rushed, so the room had stayed guarded. When she slowed down, greeted properly, and matched the social rhythm, the atmosphere changed almost immediately. Not because she won anyone over with charm, not because she performed perfect French manners, but because she stopped colliding with the structure. Marcus took another bite and said, You know what I keep thinking? What? How many stories people tell about countries are probably just stories about one misunderstanding they never got explained? Olivia turned to him. Whoa! I'm serious. No, you're right. He kept going. One strange hotel check-in, and suddenly they come home saying an entire country is cold, rude, fake, loud, distant, whatever. She nodded slowly. Because they only saw the surface reaction, not the rule underneath it. Exactly! That idea landed heavily because it felt bigger than France. Bigger than cafes, bigger than one trip. A lot of cultural judgment, Olivia realized. Probably begins in moments this small, a skipped greeting, a too loud question. A line entered from the wrong side, a joke told in the wrong tone. Tiny mismatches that create friction, and then the friction hardens into opinion. She said, I think I always imagined culture shock as something big. Like a huge dramatic difference. Marcus looked at her. Same. But it's not always big, she said. Sometimes it's microscopic. It's one word, one pause, one order of events. He pointed at her. That's good. You should write that down. The river kept moving. A breeze lifted the edge of the paper bag beside them. Somewhere across the water, someone laughed. The city no longer felt like a place that had rejected her. It felt like a place that had gently but firmly asked her to pay better attention. That distinction mattered. Olivia thought about Camille in the cafe, how calmly she had explained it all. Not with defensiveness. Not with national pride. Just with clarity. You begin with the person. That was the sentence that had changed the day. You begin with the person. What a simple thing to forget. And what a powerful thing to remember. She said, I keep going back to that line, Camille said. Marcus nodded. Same. You don't begin with your need. You begin with the person. He looked out at the water. That's bigger than travel too. Olivia laughed softly. Seriously. But again, he was right. It was bigger than travel. Because hidden inside the cafe, misunderstanding was a more universal lesson about how easily people treat their own habits as neutral. Olivia had not walked into that cafe trying to be rude. She had walked in assuming her version of normal was invisible. Natural. Default. She had not realized it. Carried a whole cultural logic with it. Direct ordering. Casual tone. Fast requests. Immediate familiarity. None of those were universal behaviors. They only felt universal because she was used to them. And maybe that was the quietest lesson of the entire trip so far. Normal is often just culture wearing everyday clothes. Marcus stood up and stretched. So, final verdict? Olivia looked up at him. On France? On the cafe incident? She considered it for a moment, then smiled. My final verdict is that nothing was wrong with the cafe. He nodded once. Correct? Nothing was wrong with the staff either. Also correct? She stood up too, brushing crumbs from her coat. The problem was that I arrived expecting familiarity to be given before respect was shown in the local way. Marcus stared at her. That is the most polished possible summary. Thank you. I've had a long day. He laughed. Clearly. They started walking again along the river, slower now, with no need to rush into dinner or another checklist stop. Olivia looked at the city differently than she had that morning. Not with idealized romance. Not with frustration. With curiosity that had become more disciplined. She still knew she would get things wrong. Probably many times. Tomorrow she might walk into some tiny shop and forget the greeting all over again. She might misread another silence, another glance, another ritual she had not yet learned. But now she carried a better question. Not, why are people acting like this? But, what meaning does this behavior have here? That question felt more generous. More useful. More adult, even. And maybe that was the real lesson hidden inside one simple meal in Paris. Travel was not only about seeing monuments, tasting food, or collecting pretty moments. It was also about meeting the limits of your own assumptions in ordinary places. A cafe, a bakery, a counter, a hello. Sometimes the deepest part of a journey happened in the smallest exchange. A missed greeting became an awkward lunch. An awkward lunch became an explanation. An explanation became a shift in perspective. And that shift, Olivia suspected, would stay with her much longer than the coffee itself. As they crossed the next bridge, she glanced back at the lights starting to glow along the riverbank and smiled to herself. This morning, she had thought the city felt cold. By evening, she understood that it had not been cold at all. It had simply been waiting for her to enter the conversation properly.